how are you guys doing today? We're here with the first series discussion of a series I finished this year. We're finally caught up on all the backlog content. I apologize, but that means I did already finish 2 series in January, and that means I'm already 2 videos behind. But we're getting caught up on it today by reviewing the first series, like I said, that I finished in 2023, which is the Trials of Apollo series by Riordan. This is the 3rd series in the Percy Jackson universe, so I'd prefer it if you would have read Percy Jackson and the Heroes of Olympus series before coming to this video, for the simple reason that this will contain spoilers for you if you have not read those 2 series. I do have a series discussion for the Heroes of Olympus series, I believe. That will be in the descriptions if I do, but I think I do. I'm trying to remember how old this channel is, so you can go watch that if you have not read those series yet. But this will be spoiler free for the Trials of Apollo series, but I will have to mention some things that will spoil those 2 other series, because otherwise there is no way to talk about this series with you. But yeah, now I'm assuming everyone who has not read Percy Jackson and the Olympians and Heroes of Olympus series is gone. I highly recommend those series if you're still here for some reason. So I'm gonna go into a synopsis of this series. So in this series, we follow Apollo, who was sent down to Earth in a mortal human body by Zeus as a punishment for what happened in the Heroes of Olympus series. And when he is sent down to Earth, he immediately comes across Meg, who is a demigod. The thing is, with apparently Greek myth, I don't know, the rules of being sent down to Earth in a mortal body usually means that you will be in servitude to another mortal being, typically a demigod, I believe it is, and like you have to do what they say, and like until that mission is done, you're not allowed to, you know, go back to being a god. So yeah, because he comes across Meg almost immediately, he ends up being in servitude to her, which neither of them are really happy about, but it does happen. And they also immediately get hunted down by monsters, so Apollo's like, hey, let's go to Camp Hall of Blood, I know the way. Things are saved there, and there he finds out that the oracles, the several different oracles in this world, have not been working, so they kind of need Apollo's help to try and fix things, because he's like, you know, the god of the oracles, you know. That's this series. It's a terrible description, I'm so sorry. So as always, I will be doing a ranking of the series. This will go from my least favorite to my favorite. My least favorite in the series was the Dark Prophecy, then we have the Tyrant's Tomb. The Hidden Oracle is in 3rd place, and in 2nd we have the Burning Mace, and my absolute favorite from the series is the Tower of Nero. So to just quickly explain that ranking, I will be going over my individual reviews for these books. So starting off with book 1 in the series, which is the Hidden Oracle, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars to. I thought it was such a fun introduction to the series. Apollo was such a fun lead character. Like, he has made appearances in the other 2 series, and I thought he was always a fun side character. But you know, being a side character is very different from being the lead. In your own series, you're constantly in his head throughout this entire series, so I was a bit nervous about that, because we have never followed a god before, and I thought it was so much fun being in his head. Like, he had his struggles with being in a mortal body, of course, and being a god and not being able to access his powers anymore, and I thought all of that was interesting, but he was still like this fun person to follow, like we had seen him before. I also immediately liked the new characters that were introduced in this book, and not too many in this book. Some of them are repeating characters from some point or another, and I really like how those were included as well. They didn't feel fan servicey, but like really in place of the story, and they were incorporated really well. And I also really loved the plot. I thought it was so interesting, and it was such a fun adventure to go on in this book, because we don't get super serious in this book yet, but it took a lot of unexpected twists and turns that I absolutely did not see coming. Like, if you saw me reading this book, at a certain point, like, my jaw was dropped multiple times, because there were so many great reveals in this. The only complaint I really had about this book is that I thought the middle section was a bit boring. I feel like in the beginning, when we got introduced to everything, was really interesting, and in the end where like some action happened was really interesting, but like in the middle where it was more like traveling, like figuring things out, like that was boring and dragged out a little bit for me. So that's why it wasn't a 5-star for me completely. And next we have the Dark Prophecy, which I give 2 to 5 stars to. This is my least favorite in the series, as you might have guessed or remembered from the ranking. I didn't really connect with Apollo in this book for some reason. It didn't have the same spark of personality that the first book had for me, and that made me very scared after finishing this book for the rest of the series. But luckily that's not an issue I continued having. I also just didn't really feel that engaged with the book because I had this disconnect from Apollo in this book, and I was a bit bored while reading this entire book, and I feel like it dragged out just a little bit more because it has the same problems as the Hidden Oracle, where like the beginning we're setting everything up, we're learning things, that's interesting, and then the ending is very action-packed, that's also interesting, and in the middle it's just nothing. But because I felt such a disconnect from Apollo, I just kind of had a disconnect with almost everything that was happening, and it kept made me a little bit more bored than I was in Hidden Oracle. I did really like the plot though, and the villain in this book is because some of the books have different villains, but they all like connect together. It's difficult to explain without spoiling it. But like the villain that we focus on in this book was very interesting, and also all of the villains have a connection to Apollo. But the way this villain was connected to Apollo I thought was really interesting and caused for some interesting dynamics within the story. Next we have the Burning Maze, which I give 4 to 5 stars to. I really love this read as well. I thought it was very enjoyable. It does have an absolutely heartbreaking ending though. From here on out the books get deep and dark, and you can tell that this is a YA series and not a middle grade series. The main thing I love about this book is that it has a big focus on nature. Meg's power as a demigod. Her mother is Demeter, I believe. So her powers are very like involved in nature and like growing things, and that really got put to the focus, like to the forefront in this book. I thought this was interesting. We also follow this camp of like nature creatures. There's a bunch of different ones. Rover was there as well, so it was fun seeing him. And because we spend a lot of time in this book at like this camp, like not like a campus in Camp Half-Blood, but like this place where a lot of these people are together, and it's like their safe haven as well, just different than Camp Half-Blood. Because we spend so much time there with these mythical creatures that have this nature connection, a lot of this is focused on nature, and I thought that was so interesting, especially because it gave us a chance to go more into Meg's past and her powers and being and character growth, and I really like that. I also always love the setting of the lab world. This is, I think, like the 3rd or 4th time we've done this. I really love it every single time. I loved it when we first did it in the Percy Jackson series, and I love it every single time we return back to it. It's slightly different every single time, which I really like. The labyrinth of course is huge, so it makes sense that it's different every time, but I really love every single time it's included, and this was not an exception. Next we have the Tyrant's Tomb, which I give 4 to 5 stars to as well. I feel like the first half of the book felt very stretched out, and then the ending was like action, and I just feel like it would have been better for this book to kind of like, I don't know, divide better. Because for the first part of this book I thought I was gonna not like it like I did with book 2, but luckily like things picked up towards the end for me. I loved spending time with Camp Jupiter though. I always think it's a shame that we haven't spent more time at that place, because I think it's actually more interesting than Camp Half-Blood. I know that's a shame. I love Camp Half-Blood with my entire heart, but maybe it is because I haven't spent as much time there. I think Camp Jupiter is very vast and very different from Camp Half-Blood, and I always love spending time there, and I think this book again was no exception. There's a lot of interesting elements there. We also got introduced to a bunch of new characters at Camp Jupiter who I also all thought were interesting, and then of course we get to see some old familiar faces again, like we do in every single book. That was handled it really well. Towards the end a lot of big things happened that made me very excited to see how everything was going to wrap up in the final book. That means we have arrived to the last book, which is the Tower of Nero, which is 5 to 5 stars. This is my favorite in the series by far. This is the perfect finale to the series. It was action from page 1 to page, I don't know how many pages it is, but it was very action-packed throughout the entire thing. And I loved how this book kind of threw like little actions and stuff, or either going back to characters we visited in the beginning of the series and haven't seen since then. It really showed the growth of Apollo and Meg, but mainly Apollo, because again we're in his head, and I really loved how that was shown in this book. Like I said, the plot is moving from like the very first page and doesn't stop moving until the very end. It's very high stakes, and I could not read fast enough. Like literally there were certain points where the tension was at its peak height that I was just like forcing myself to like not skip lines because I wanted to know what was gonna happen next, but like of course I need things to be in order. I thought Nero is an amazing villain. We've seen him throughout this entire series, but like in this book he really gets this moment to like be full force villain, and I thought it was so great. And I loved how the series wrapped up and where it left these characters in. Those are my thoughts on each individual book, so let's go into my overall thoughts of this series. I guess it's no surprise to anyone that I thoroughly enjoyed my time reading this series. It's not my favorite Riordan series. I think it does have to land as my least favorite for now. I've only read the Percy Jackson universe, but I do think my favorite is in the way they were released. So Percy Jackson first, then The Heroes of Olympus, and then this. But I still had a really good time reading this series and I absolutely loved it. I thought this had such an absolutely amazing cast of characters because Apollo and Meg are traveling constantly in this series. We do get to see like different groups of people in every single book that kept us from feeling like very white, and like we got to know so many different characters, and I really loved that. And then Apollo and Meg especially are amazing characters, and I loved seeing their growth in the series. I also really loved the friendship between Apollo and Meg and how they grew throughout the series. I do think Riordan is a great author and I really love his writing. He's very funny just in his writing. Like of course it comes through into like the characters' personalities, but like also just like in general, I chuckle several times while reading his books every single time. So I can't just blame that on just like one good character, you know? And every single book in the series had a very interesting plot and a lot of amazing twists and turns that I definitely did not see coming. It is a darker series than the other Percy Jackson verse books. I do think the Heroes of Olympus is also a bit darker, but this one goes even deeper on it, and I'm very excited to read more about Riordan in the future. I have already started the King Chronicles and I'm really enjoying it as well so far. So yeah, my mission for 2023 is to finally get through all of Riordan's backlist because I've been meaning to do that for a while and I just never get around to it, and for 2023 it's like definitely my mission. So yeah, there we go. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought of the series. If you've read it, feel free to go into spoilery details. I prefer to make these videos spoiler free just so everyone has access to it, but I love discussing things in spoilers, so definitely leave those in the comments if you have them. Just put like a little spoiler warning on top of your comments so people who are watching this video who have not read the series know not to read your comments. And yeah, that's it for today. Hopefully I'll see you around next time. Bye.